On July 29, 2025, the quiet streets of Shipuri district in Madhya Pradesh, India, erupted into chaos. CCTV cameras from a small neighborhood store captured the terrifying moment 6 masked men stormed the shop. They were heavily armed, carrying sticks, an axe, and even a homemade firearm. The shopkeeper, realizing what was about to unfold, reacted in seconds. With sheer instinct, he pulled down the metal shutter, slamming it closed just as the attackers reached the entrance. That thin barrier was the only thing separating him from certain violence. But the mob didn't stop there. They shouted death threats, pounded against the shutter with weapons, and even fired a shot before finally retreating. The footage left no question about their intent. Local reports suggest at least one of the suspects has been identified, a man already known for criminal activity, yet no arrests have been made. That silence from authorities has only deepened the fear and frustration of the community. Police reportedly tried to seize the CCTV system, but the owner refused, worried the evidence would disappear. Though the shopkeeper escaped without physical harm, the damage was already done. The terror of that night lingers, leaving him afraid to even return to his livelihood. What was once a place of routine and survival has now become a reminder of how fragile safety can be when violence strikes so close to home. It's unsettling to see how an ordinary workday can spiral into something horrific. Luckily, he escaped without any physical injuries. But in this next video, we unfortunately can't say the same. It was the evening rush hour in Seoul, South Korea, when the ordinary chaos of city life turned into something far more sinister. The subway was crowded. More than 160 passengers pressed shoulder to shoulder inside a car on Line 5, traveling between Yoinaru and Mappo stations. For most, it was just another commute. But for one man, it was the stage for an act that would shock the nation. Among the passengers was a 67-year-old man, later identified only as Juan. Quiet and unassuming, he carried with him a plastic bottle hidden inside his backpack, an object so ordinary, yet capable of unleashing something devastating. Have a look. Without warning, he pulled it out, poured gasoline across the floor of the subway car, and seconds later, ignited it with a torch. Flames erupted instantly, swallowing the confined space in heat and smoke. Panic tore through the car. Passengers screamed, rushing for the doors as the fire spread across the floor. Thick smoke filled the air, burning eyes and choking lungs. The train operator brought the subway to a stop and, with the help of staff, began fighting back the blaze with extinguishers. When the doors finally slid open, terrified passengers poured out onto the tracks, stumbling through the darkness, desperate to escape. Some collapsed from the smoke, others clutched at strangers, all of them marked by the terror of knowing how close they had come to disaster. By the time it was over, 129 people required medical treatment on the scene. 23 were rushed to hospitals for smoke inhalation, and 6 suffered minor injuries. Yet, despite the chaos, no one lost their life. The man responsible was arrested at the next station. Under questioning, he confessed. Investigators revealed a disturbing picture. 10 days before the attack, he had purchased nearly 4 liters of gasoline. He closed his bank accounts, transferred his assets to relatives, and in the days leading up to May 31st, he wandered across subway lines 1, 2, and 4, searching for the right moment. The day of the fire, he chose Line 5. His motive, prosecutors said, was rooted in personal despair. He had just lost an appeal in his divorce case. But what he carried into that subway car went far beyond grief or anger. They described his act as deliberate, calculated, and equivalent to terrorism. By setting fire inside a packed train, they said, he knew exactly what he was risking: the lives of every single passenger. On June 25th, he was formally charged with attempted murder, aggravated arson, and rail safety violations. He now faces 160 counts of attempted murder, one for each soul aboard the train that night. And while no lives were lost, the scars of that evening remain. A crowded subway car, a bottle of gasoline, and one man's decision to turn personal despair into public tragedy. For the hundreds who were there, the sound of screams and the sting of smoke will not soon be forgotten. Terrifying encounters like these are never easily forgotten, and as you'll see in the next video, Gene will not soon forget his experience either. Whitewater kayaking is a sport built on precision, courage, and control, and the rivers of Europe are littered with rapids that test even the most experienced paddlers. And Corsica, with its steep granite canyons and unpredictable flows, has long been a proving ground. Among those who thrive in these waters is Jean-Christophe Cabouy, known in the kayaking community simply as JC. A skilled paddler with years of experience, he has built a reputation for tackling some of the most challenging rapids Europe has to offer. But even for someone like him, nature has a way of reminding you who is in charge. On what should have been just another descent, JC and some fellow kayakers approached a section of river notorious for its power. Beneath the frothing surface lay something kayakers fear most: a hydraulic whirlpool. These are traps of water created where currents fold back on themselves, producing a sucking force capable of pinning even the strongest paddlers. Entering one by mistake can mean minutes without air. Minutes most people don't survive. JC's kayak hit the turbulence, and in an instant, he was flipped upside down. Normally, a quick roll would have brought him back to the surface, but here, the water worked against him. Every attempt failed, each second dragging him deeper into panic as the whirlpool clutched the kayak like a hand refusing to let go. His body thrashed beneath the surface, the kayak spinning violently as his helmet disappeared again and again into the froth. His friends saw what was happening. There was no time to hesitate. They rushed into the torrent, risking themselves to save him. One leapt forward, grabbing hold of the overturned boat, while another fought to steady against the current. It was a desperate struggle, a fight not just against the river, but against the seconds ticking by as JC's air ran out. At last, their efforts broke him free. With a final heave, they pulled him from the hydraulic and dragged him back to safety. JC gasped for air, shaken but alive. The river had nearly claimed him, and only the swift reaction of his friends stood between survival and tragedy. For kayakers, it was a sobering reminder. Skill, preparation, and experience can take you far. But the river is never truly mastered. It demands respect every time, because one mistake, or one hidden hydraulic, can be the difference between a thrilling ride and a life cut short. JC would recover, but the footage of that day remains. A raw, terrifying testament to the power of water and the thin line between adventure and disaster. Luckily, JC came out unharmed, but sadly, we can't say the same for the people in the next video. The crossing was meant to be routine. The KM Barcelona VA, a passenger ferry traveling between the Talaud Islands and the provincial capital of Manado, carried hundreds of people across the waters of North Sulawesi. Families, fishermen, students, ordinary passengers expecting nothing more than another long voyage under the heat of the Indonesian sun. But routine turned into catastrophe in an instant.
Barcelona 5A, kebakaran di depan Pulau Talise. Mohon pihak yang monitor ini, kami mohon bantuan. Saat ini kapal kebakaran.
Thick smoke began to rise from the upper deck, curling into the sky before anyone could understand what was happening. Within minutes, flames spread, racing across the vessel. Panic took hold. Voices shouted over one another, some crying for help, others yelling for life jackets. And then came the screams, the raw sound of fear, as people realized the fire would not be contained. Videos taken from the water shows the ferry engulfed, the entire structure glowing with fire while passengers leapt into the sea below. Parents clutched their children, groups huddled together in the waves, and still the flames roared, devouring everything in sight. The ocean, once a promise of travel, became the only refuge.
Ya Allah, baru mau masuk Manado. Sebagian salah kita. Allah. Oh, makasih Om.
Kenapa sana kapal terbakar? Dan puji Tuhan, Ner, Tante, Abi, Prisil, orang semua selamat.
Rescue efforts began almost immediately. The Indonesian Navy, the Coast Guard, and even local fishermen raced to the scene, pulling survivors from the water. Inflatable boats circled the wreck, pulling people out one by one, while others floated adrift, clinging to debris. Some would survive with only shock and exhaustion. Others, tragically, would not. Among the victims was a pregnant woman. Also, a 2-month-old infant was hauled from the sea barely alive, his lungs filled with water, but luckily saved in time. Authorities later confirmed at least 3 lives lost, with others missing, and more than 500 survivors pulled from the sea, far more than the official manifest had listed. The numbers raised troubling questions about safety standards and overcrowding, but those debates would come later. In the moment, what remained was the haunting sight of a ship consumed and the memory of voices crying out through the smoke. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. Mechanical failure, negligence, no answers yet. Only charred metal and survivors who carry the memory of what they endured. For them, the sound of fire crackling above the waves, the cries of strangers in the dark water, and the vision of the KM Barcelona burning against the horizon will never fade. In the end, the ferry completed no voyage. It became another reminder of how fragile life is when fire and water collide, and how survival can come down to seconds, to chance, to the strength of those who reach into the flames and the waves to pull others free. It was another reminder of how fragile life becomes when fire and water collide, where survival depends on mere seconds, blind chance, and the courage of those who risk everything to pull others to safety. After tragedy at sea, the next danger came from land, where what seemed routine suddenly became life-threatening. On July 27, 2025, a routine task turned into a moment of sheer violence. In the city of Manggu, Xiao Tong, in Yunnan Province, China, a man was performing maintenance on a massive industrial tire, something he had likely done countless times before. But in an instant, everything went wrong. Without warning, the tire erupted with explosive force. The pressure inside burst outward, launching the man upward in a violent blast. The power of it was staggering, a reminder of just how dangerous compressed air and industrial equipment can be. Miraculously, reports suggest he was only grazed by the explosion. Had the blast struck him directly, the outcome almost certainly would have been fatal. Details about his condition were hard to find online, but the footage of the incident leaves no doubt about how close he came to losing his life. Industrial accidents like this serve as stark reminders. Something as ordinary as a tire, a tool we take for granted on the road every day, can become deadly when scaled up to the size of heavy machinery. One slip, one moment of pressure too high, and the result is devastating. It's disturbing to see that life can change in an instant. You will see the same happening in the following video. On April 1st, 2022, in Novosibirsk, Russia, an ordinary walk between 2 apartment blocks turned into a nightmare. As a woman crossed the narrow courtyard, a massive sheet of ice broke free from the roof above. Without warning, it plummeted down, striking her with devastating force. Residents nearby rushed to her side, their calls for help echoing through the courtyard as they alerted emergency services. Paramedics arrived quickly, carrying her away to the hospital. But what happened after remains uncertain. Her exact condition was never disclosed, and local authorities have offered no updates since. In many Russian cities, falling ice is a seasonal danger, roofs and overhangs becoming silent threats as winter loosens its grip. For the woman caught beneath the weight of it, the danger was no longer a distant statistic, but a brutal reality. Here, the woman didn't seek out danger, yet she faced it nonetheless. But what happens when someone actively chases the thrill and comes face to face with real danger? You'll see it unfold in the next video. Paragliding is meant to be an escape, a way to drift above the earth, to feel the wind carry you, and to take in views few will ever experience. On Jeju Island in South Korea, the sport is especially popular, drawing tourists year after year to its cliffs and beaches. But on June 19, 2023, one flight would turn into a nightmare. That afternoon, a 60-year-old man, identified only as Mr. A, launched into the skies near Seobjakoji Beach in Seogwipo City. The conditions were fair, the flight seemingly routine. But as he drifted further inland, his path crossed with danger few ever imagine from the air. High-voltage power lines stretched across the landscape, and in a single mistake of distance and wind, Mr. A became tangled in them. Witnesses looked on in horror as his paraglider snagged the cables, leaving him suspended in midair. A call was placed to emergency services at 4:35 p.m. Crews rushed to the scene, and the Korea Electric Power Corporation quickly cut the power in an attempt to save him. For nearly 2 hours, they worked against the odds, trying to free him from the web of wires. But the damage had already been done. Police and fire authorities later confirmed that the cables carried a lethal current of nearly 23,000 volts. Mr. A had been electrocuted before rescue could reach him. At 6:29 p.m., he was declared dead at the scene. That haunting video, filmed by a bystander, spread online soon after. The person behind the camera, speaking Mandarin, can be heard repeating in despair, "It's over. It's over. It's too late. They are dead." That small detail led to early confusion, with reports mistakenly claiming the accident had taken place in China. It was only later that officials confirmed the location: Jeju Island, South Korea. For a community where paragliding is a joy, the tragedy showed that even the most beautiful parts of nature can turn deadly. In Oman, it wasn't the sky, but the sudden force of water that brought the danger. In Rustak, a town in South Oman's Al Batina region, the summer of 2022 brought sudden chaos. After heavy rain swept through the area, the normally dry Wadi Al Hokain riverbed transformed into a torrent of rushing water. What began as a seasonal storm quickly turned into a flash flood. Fast, violent, and unforgiving. Caught on camera were several young men near the river's edge. At first, they seemed unaware of just how dangerous the current had become. But within seconds, the ground beneath them turned treacherous.
Korban. La ilaha illallah.
One of them had slipped, his body lurching dangerously close to the flood. In an instant, the water threatened to pull him under. What followed was a desperate struggle. For a moment, it looked as though they would lose him to the river, but together, with sheer strength and urgency, they dragged him back to safety. This time, luck was on their side. No lives were lost, no injuries reported. But the footage serves as a sobering reminder. Flash floods in Oman claim lives every year. They arrive without warning, their power overwhelming, their reach merciless. And for the young men at the edge of Wadi al-Hokain that day, the difference between survival and tragedy came down to seconds, and the hands of friends who refused to let go. Although with some dangers the source is clear, others are harder to explain. And that brings us to this last clip, shared by TikTok user Skywatcher_123. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a casual recording of the misty weather outside her home. According to her, the haze had rolled in just after a plane passed overhead, and she wanted to capture the unsettling event on camera. But as she filmed, something else appeared. Something she hadn't expected.
I got that on video.
Out of the mist, a sudden orb of light emerged, drifting toward her with startling speed. The sight shook her so much that instinct took over, and she ran back inside. She explained that she believed the light wasn't natural at all, but a spirit making itself known. Yet once she shared the footage, not everyone saw it that way. Some suggested it could have been a rare case of ball lightning, a phenomenon known to appear in stormy, misty conditions. Others dismissed it as nothing more than an insect, reflecting in the beam of her own light and creating the illusion of something extraordinary. But despite all the theories, she stood by her belief that what she had witnessed was something otherworldly. And maybe that's why the video lingers in the mind. Was it truly a case of ball lightning, just an insect caught in the glow? Or, as she believes, a spirit crossing through the mist? Let me know in the comments what you believe it was. Now that was all for today, folks. If you enjoyed these horrifying clips, click to see more on the video on screen.